Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It was a really great morning of sessions, and we've got a wonderful lineup this afternoon as well. First up in this room is Kyle Henderson, and he's going to give a great presentation on telling your IT story.
How do you know it's going to be great?
I've heard you do it before, and it's fantastic.
Okay.
So in any case, if you have any questions or comments and you are attending this session virtually, please feel free to put those in the chat and I'll read them out. If you're attending in person, raise your hand and I will walk a microphone over to you. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Kyle Henderson.
Thanks, Laurel. Okay. Telling and selling your IT story. This is a flash talk. We're not going to take very long. It's just going to be a few minutes, going to hit some highlights, but hopefully it will be helpful for you, especially those of you who have IT stories to tell, like things about new events, new symposia, that sort of thing. First, we're going to talk about tell. That is, we're going to talk about creating content with narrative structure. And then we'll talk about sell, or making visible that your story with a content marketing loop. So what do I mean by telling, by creating content with narrative structure? If you did any sort of advanced learning in communication, strategic communications, you'd be familiar with the name Walter Fisher. Walter Fisher was a communication theorist in the 80s. He was at USC. He devised this communication theory that every student has to study called the narrative paradigm. And the essence of the narrative paradigm was Fisher claimed at a time when some of you may remember in the lexicon, the paradigm shift. Fisher claimed that narrative for human beings was the fundamental way that we think, value, and act. And if you've ever done any kind of communications, you know that those are big, big words when you are talking to people to try to persuade them to do something or inform them about something. So the great part of that for strategic communications in general is that it is so incredibly simple that every story, whether in novel form or movie or presentation or whatever it might be, has the same basic structure, every single one. And it goes like this. First, you set the scene. If you can think of your favorite movie, in the first 10 minutes, you know where it is, when it is, those sorts of things, setting the scene. So what I'm going to talk about is how we take those narrative structures and sort of turn them just a little bit so that they are super appropriate in our kind of institutional environment. And setting the scene, the question becomes less about where it is and when it is, than it becomes why it matters. Why does this thing matter, this story that we want to tell from an IT perspective? Is it because a support deadline is coming up? Is it because there's a big change in personnel, like a new CIO coming up? Why does it matter? That's how we set the scene for our IT story. We answer that question. Next, it is a narrative establishes a characters. We find out very early on in a movie, in a play, and whatever, who it is that we're involved with. Likewise, telling an IT story using narrative structure establishes who the characters are. Who's involved in this thing? Are there executives involved? Well, we need to know that. Who are the people who are going to be doing the work? Well, we need to know that. We want to know that as human beings. Then thirdly, the plot, which for us as IT communicators becomes how and when do we get from current state to desired future state. We've got a big, huge project, an initiative, the interoperability initiative, whatever the case might be. How are we going to get from where we are today to where we want to be in the future? And then lastly, from a narrative structure is resolution. Now, for a movie or whatever, that's kind of the how the story all comes together and we fade to black. But I'm going to suggest that a way that we can apply that in our context is our resolution is how we stay in touch. Why does it matter? Who's involved? How and when do we get to our desired future state? And then how do we stay in touch with you, the people that we are trying to speak to with our IT story? Any questions on that? All right, we'll move on. So let's assume that we've got it down. We've got our narrative, our scene, our characters, our plot, our resolution. We are satisfied with the story that we want to tell. Then the next question is, how do we sell that, or how do we make that visible to the audience that needs to know about this story that we are telling? Now, I'm going to suggest that we have a way here on campus that is very mature and works great in building a content marketing loop to tell that story. Here's one, for example, the first thing you do is you build a comprehensive web page or website. You can barely see the screenshot there, but it's the Microsoft Copilot service page, for example, that's on it.wisc.edu. After you've built the comprehensive web page or website where you've told why it's important, who's involved, what the plot is, and how you stay in touch, after you've built that, next is a news post announcing the page. We're talking about the most important aspects of the page, giving a thumbnail sketch of what the page contains. Okay, so website or web page, then news post announcing the page. And then the last part of the content marketing loop, an email message linking to the post or page, pushing that content out to that place where they receive such messages in our environment more than anywhere else, and that is via email. Tell the content story by creating content with narrative structure. Sell or make visible your IT story by building a content marketing loop with web page, news post, and email message. Well, you said it was supposed to be a flash thing, right? Yeah, that's what I've got. What? Any questions? Yes.
So when you have something that has lots of updates over a long time,
Yeah.
what's the best way to engage people in all those updates?
Nick, you want to answer that question? Well, there are lots of ways to do it here. I mean, for example, we frequently have a service email associated with a particular project. We frequently will publish forms that folks want in order for people to give their email message to us so that we can send messages out to them. You see what I'm saying? So we've got the means to do that here on campus with the tools that we have at our disposal. Does that answer your question? In other words, that's kind of infinite. You know, if you create a form that has where people sign up for it, you do this, then you have a form on that page that says, hey, if you want us to keep in touch with you with changes or whatever, give us your email address, build a list of those people, then you can communicate to them that way. We do that quite frequently. Anything else, folks? Yes.
Question for you. So on these web pages,
Yeah.
these need to various audiences are going to read these. So the characters, various audiences, some technical, some non-technical, are going to read these web pages, and we want all these audiences to understand what we're trying to get across.
Right.
How do you think about the words that we use on these public web pages and balancing technical versus non-technical for multiple audiences around the university?
Yeah, great question. One of the difficulties of our task.
Repeat the question in the mic for Zoom.
Here, I'll tell you what. Can I have you repeat it, Todd?
They can hear it okay online.
Oh, okay.
Here you go, Kyle.
They're stealing mine.
I don't have to repeat it.
So how do you tell this this narrative structure or whatever, tell this story with different audiences, with very different, lots of differences, you know, as part of those audiences. And and I would say that here's where a structure that goes from general to detailed can be helpful if I'm catching your meaning. An example. I worked for someone at the university who was super detail oriented. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Engineer, process engineer, and kind of assumed that what everybody was interested in was the you know, the details of every project or whatever. But using at the time sort of a Myers-Briggs kind of way of structuring the content where, you know, a certain personality is going to want to know just the you know, yeah, give me the stuff that's important now, all the way down to sort of a fourth profile that wants to know all the details. I would suggest that what is important in communicating that kind of distinction is order. The essentials up top, stuff about people perhaps toward the middle. All the details, extreme details that are important to part of the audience toward the end, because that person will continue to read until they get the details that they want, and they'll spend all the time that they need to do that. Sometimes that requires multiple pages. You know, sometimes it means get more here, linking off to, you know, another page with those sorts of details. But the idea really is, here's where, who's your audience? What do you want them to do? What do they need in order to do that? Those three questions we talk about when we're talking about these topics with more time and, you know, in other presentations become important. If they need that level of, if some of your audience needs that level of detail, you have to find a way to display that, usually toward the end or on a supplemental page. Does that help? Okay. Yeah. Yes, Sarah.
How do you make your story stand out? Because we get so much information. How do you make your story pop so people actually read it?
Well, you have really good writers like Nick over here, or like Carissa Rundy, who comes from she spent time at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and at the UW Health to tell that story in a way that's super compelling. However, I would say that, for example, when Carissa writes a story that is just really great, it's still following this structure. She's setting the scene, she's talking about the characters, she's giving the plot, and then she's giving resolution. And it's that structure that's available to all of us. Not all of us, myself included, have the talent to be able to write a great, compelling sort of article. But all of us have the ability to work within this structure so that at the very least, we're following a way that our brains work to take that sort of information in. Nick, do you have anything to add on that?
Just ethnic.
I'm here with my colleague, Nick Hanen, who's one of our communication consultants and is also a terrific writer.
If you find yourself trying to sound smart, stop doing that. Like, just talk like a normal person. Like, imagine you're telling the story to a grandparent or someone you just met, because anyone could visit your website.
Sure.
And you want anyone to be able to get hooked by it sometime.
Okay. Anything else? How are we on time?
There was a call out for taking the plain language training course that's offered here at W Madison
Yeah.
online, which if anyone has not explored that option, I would highly recommend it.
And that's especially important for IT folks because, you know, we're involved in technical you, I should say, I'm not an IT person, I'm a communications person, but I work with you. And so you are involved in highly technical sorts of enterprises. And so that's especially important to sort of learn that skill of writing in plain language to be able to tell and sell, whatever it is that you're talking about. Anything else, folks? You've been a very nice and attentive audience, and I appreciate that. Thank you.